Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to get into daring leadership?
Always ready.
Yeah. It seems like everyone's talking about it these days, but what does it actually mean?
Right.
So we're going to try to answer that question today.
Exactly.
Our source material is a presentation by Dr. Diane Van Hook. And we're hoping to give you the key takeaways from that. So you can,
and most importantly, how you can actually apply it in your own life.
Exactly.
So work, or through a personal life, to
everything,
everything.
To being a good human.
Yeah.
So Dr. Van Hook starts off with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt.
Of course.
The Man in the Arena. Have you heard this one?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic.
It's such a good one.
It is.
And it's all about how it's not the critics who matter.
Right.
It's the people who are actually in the game.
Yeah, who are daring to try.
Daring to try.
Who are taking action.
Making action.
Stepping into the arena.
I love that visual of stepping into the arena.
Huh.
And I think that really sets the stage for why this is so important now.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever, yeah. Because the world is
changing so fast.
It's crazy.
It really is.
Like if we think back just 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, think about smartphones.
Oh my gosh.
Like they were just
brand new.
They were like
mad.
Coming out, and now it's like we can't live without them.
Yeah, you see like babies with them.
I know, it's crazy.
It's crazy how fast things have changed.
And so in this environment, you need leaders who are adaptable.
Right, and courageous.
Yeah.
And not afraid of the unknown.
Because it feels like so much is unknown.
Yeah, and like the old ways of doing things just aren't working anymore.
Yeah, and she talks about how traditional leadership models, they kind of fall apart.
Right, they just don't cut it.
They don't cut it.
Like avoiding tough conversations.
Yeah, or like pretending everything's okay.
Right, or not building real trust.
Yeah.
These things just don't fly anymore.
Yeah, it's like we need a new playbook.
Yeah, exactly. Daring leadership is that new playbook.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a whole new set of skills.
So she breaks down daring leadership into 4 key skill sets.
Yes.
Rumbling with vulnerability.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Living into our values.
Love that.
Braving trust.
So important.
And learning to rise.
Yeah.
So we'll dive into each of those.
Yeah.
But I want to start with rumbling with vulnerability.
Okay.
Because that one maybe is the scariest.
For a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the most misunderstood.
Yeah.
So what is rumbling with vulnerability?
Well, it's kind of like it sounds. Right. It's about being willing to have those tough conversations, to be open and honest, even when it's uncomfortable.
So not shying away from conflict.
No. Embracing it.
But in a healthy way.
Right, in a way that actually moves things forward.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, myself included, we've been conditioned to view vulnerability as weakness.
Right, it's like this big scary thing.
Yeah, so let's unpack that a little bit. Like, how does she define vulnerability?
Well, she defines it as the willingness to kind of let your guard down. To be open to new experiences and connections, even though, you might get hurt.
It's risky.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also like the key to real connection.
Okay. So it's about embracing the risk of being hurt.
Yeah.
Of not having all the answers. Of just being human.
Exactly.
Okay.
So one of the biggest myths she tackles is that vulnerability equals weakness.
Ooh. I'm glad she's tackling that one.
Right. Because actually she argues that it's a sign of courage.
Oh, interesting.
It takes a lot of strength to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
To be open and honest and risk rejection.
Yeah. That's really true.
So it's not weak at all.
Okay. So I think we often associate vulnerability with like
crying.
Yeah. Or like admitting we're scared. But it can also look like
asking for help.
Yeah.
Or saying no when you need to. Or speaking up against injustice.
Yes.
It's about showing up authentically even when it's hard.
I love that.
Yeah.
And another myth she debunks is that vulnerability is just for our personal lives.
Right. Like we check it at the door when we go to work.
Exactly.
But actually, she says it's crucial for building trust.
At work?
Yeah. Which is essential for good leadership.
Absolutely.
And for good teamwork.
I've definitely worked in environments where vulnerability was like
a no-no.
Like you had to have it all together all the time.
You can't show any weakness.
Right. And it just created this culture of fear and distrust.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you couldn't really be yourself.
No.
And that's where the concept of rumbling comes in.
Right.
So tell me more about that.
So rumbling is about having those tough conversations.
Okay.
But doing it in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
It's about engaging in conflict, but with the goal of
solving problems.
Yeah.
Working through it together.
Not just like
shoving it under the rug.
Right, yeah.
Or pretending it's not there.
So it's not about fighting or arguing.
It's about having productive conversations.
Right.
That are vulnerable and aimed at finding solutions.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're embracing vulnerability and we're willing to rumble,
Yeah.
how do we actually put those concepts into practice?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of our own armor.
Armor?
Yeah, you know those self-protective mechanisms we use to avoid vulnerability?
Oh, so like pretending we're not afraid, or hiding our true feelings, or blaming others for our mistakes.
Exactly. All those things that we do to kind of protect ourselves.
Okay.
But the problem is that armor might feel safe in the moment, but it also prevents us from really connecting with people.
Right.
And from taking risks and growing.
So we're like stuck.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, so the presentation talks about 5 steps to assembling our armor.
Oh, yeah. I love this part.
It's so true, and I think we've all been there.
We all have.
So it starts with that feeling of not being enough.
Right.
And then we start worrying about what other people think.
Which leads to
perfectionism.
Yes.
People pleasing.
All of that.
And then eventually we end up blaming others for our own behavior.
Yeah, just to avoid that feeling of vulnerability.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is.
So how do we break free from that?
Well, first we have to recognize that armor.
Okay.
And then we have to understand how it's holding us back. And then we have to consciously choose to put it down.
So it's a choice.
It is.
We have to choose to be vulnerable.
Yeah, and she emphasizes action.
Okay.
It's not about waiting until we feel brave or confident. It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
So like fake it till you make it.
Kind of, but it's more like do it even though you're scared.
Okay.
Because the more we act courageously, the more that fear will start to dissipate.
I like that.
Yeah.
So she talks about empathy as being a powerful tool for dismantling armor.
Yeah.
And she uses this phrase, vulnerability thief.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so tell me more about that.
So what she's saying is that when we're met with shame or judgment,
Okay.
it makes us want to retreat back into our armor.
Oh, so it's like you try to be vulnerable and then someone's like, don't be so weak.
Right, or they criticize you.
Yeah, and it makes you never want to open up again.
Exactly.
So shame steals our vulnerability.
Yeah, it robs us of that opportunity to connect.
Wow, okay, so to create a culture where vulnerability can thrive, we need to cultivate empathy.
Yes.
So how do we move from shame to empathy, both in ourselves and the people around us?
Well, the presentation suggests 5 key skills for creating empathy.
Ooh, I love lists.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one is seeing the world from different perspectives.
Okay.
Second is practicing non-judgment. Third is understanding and communicating our understanding of other people's feelings.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's important.
Okay.
Fourth is recognizing that everyone is doing the best they can.
I like that one.
Yeah, and finally, setting boundaries with those who aren't able to be empathetic.
So it's about protecting our own vulnerability.
Yeah, while still trying to cultivate empathy in others.
I love those 5 skills.
Yeah, they're really helpful.
And it makes me think that maybe empathy is the key, not just to dismantling our own armor,
Right.
but to helping other people do the same.
Exactly.
So it's like this ripple effect.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about vulnerability.
Yeah.
We've talked about rumbling. And we've talked about empathy.
The foundation of daring leadership.
And all of this leads to the next skill set, which is living into our values.
Yes.
Let's dive into that now.
Let's do it. And living into our values is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, we talk about values a lot,
Yeah, we do.
but it can be hard to know what it actually looks like to live them.
Especially at work.
Exactly. Like, you see a company's values printed out somewhere.
Right, like on a poster.
Yeah, but do they actually live them?
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the time it's just lip service.
Totally. So Dr. Van Hook says it's about more than just words.
Okay.
It's about aligning our actions with those beliefs.
So walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And she gives 3 specific ways that leaders can help establish clarity of values within their teams.
Okay, I'm listening.
So first, they need to create a space where people's strengths are recognized, like appreciating what each person brings to the table.
Instead of trying to make everyone the same.
Right. Because when people feel valued for who they are,
Yeah.
they're more likely to show up authentically.
And that's when real leadership can happen.
Exactly. Okay, so the second way is to help translate values into behaviors.
Okay.
Because it's not enough to just have a list of values.
Yeah, we have to know what they look like in action.
Exactly. So for example, if one of your values is integrity,
Yeah.
you might define that as always doing the right thing even when no one's watching.
Right. Or being honest in your communication.
Exactly. It's about making it concrete.
Okay, I like that.
And then the third way is to create a culture of accountability.
Ooh, that's the hard part.
It is, because
Okay.
it's easy to talk about values,
Yeah,
but it's much harder to hold people accountable when they're not living them.
for sure.
So Dr. Van Hook talks about regular check-ins,
Okay.
open feedback,
Yeah.
and a willingness to have tough conversations.
Yeah, those rumbles.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where values aren't just aspirational,
Right.
but they're actually integrated into how we work.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a big shift, but it's so important.
Okay, so we've talked about vulnerability and rumbling and empathy,
Yes.
and now we're talking about living into our values.
It's all connected.
It is. And it all leads to the next big piece of daring leadership, which is braving trust.
Ooh, trust. That's a big one.
It is. And I think it's something that we all crave,
Yeah.
both in our personal lives and our professional lives.
Absolutely.
But why is trust so important in a workplace?
Well, Dr. Van Hook says that trust is the defining characteristic of the best workplaces.
Really?
Yeah. When there's trust, people feel safe to take risks, to
Mhm.
share their ideas, and to really collaborate.
It creates that psychological safety that we talked about earlier.
Right. That feeling that you can be yourself.
And you won't be punished for making a mistake.
Exactly. And without trust, teams become dysfunctional.
Oh, yeah.
Communication breaks down and innovation suffers.
So basically everything falls apart.
Pretty much.
Okay, so how do we build trust?
Well, it starts with honesty,
Even when it's hard.
especially when it's hard. She has this great quote: clear is kind, unclear is unkind.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, it's so true. Sometimes we try to avoid difficult conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but that lack of clarity can actually erode trust over time.
Yeah, it's like we think we're being nice,
Right,
but really we're just making things worse.
exactly. So be upfront, be direct, even when it's not easy.
Okay, so honesty is the foundation.
Yes. And to help us really understand the elements of trust, she introduces this tool called the Braving Inventory.
A braving inventory. Okay, what is that?
So it's an acronym.
I love a good acronym.
Me too. So braving stands for the 7 key elements of trust:
Okay, hit me with it.
boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault integrity, non-judgment, and generosity.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it's so good.
Yeah.
So let's break it down, starting with boundaries.
Okay.
So boundaries are about setting clear expectations and limits,
Okay.
about communicating what's okay and what's not okay and why.
So it's about respecting ourselves and others.
Yeah, and creating a framework for healthy interactions.
Okay, makes sense.
So then we have reliability.
Okay, so that's about being dependable.
Right. Showing up on time, doing what you say you'll do, communicating clearly.
It's about being someone people can count on.
Exactly. Which creates a sense of security and stability.
Okay.
And then we have accountability.
Which is all about taking responsibility for our actions.
Yes, both the good and the bad.
So if you make a mistake, you own up to it.
You apologize and you take steps to correct it.
And you don't blame other people.
Right, because that erodes trust. Okay, so next we have vault.
Vault. Like a bank vault.
Exactly. It's about confidentiality.
Okay, so if someone tells you something in confidence,
You don't go blabbing it to everyone.
right, you keep it safe.
Exactly. You respect their privacy.
Makes sense.
Okay, so then we have integrity.
Which is all about walking the talk.
Yes, aligning your actions with your words.
So you don't say one thing and then do another.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because that's a recipe for distrust.
For sure.
Okay, so then we have non-judgment.
So being open-minded
Yes, listening without criticizing.
and creating a space where people feel safe to share.
Exactly, even if you don't agree with them.
Okay.
And finally, we have generosity.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, generosity is about giving freely without expecting anything in return.
So helping others out.
Yeah, offering support, sharing your knowledge.
It's about creating a culture of abundance.
Exactly. And what's really cool about the Braving Inventory is that all of these elements are interconnected.
Oh, so you can't really have one without the others.
Right, it's a package deal
Okay, so it's about cultivating all 7 elements.
to build real trust.
And that brings us to the final skill set of daring leadership.
Which is
Learning to rise.
Yes. One of my favorites.
Mine too. And I think it's especially relevant these days.
Oh, for sure. The world is changing so fast.
Yeah, and we're constantly facing challenges.
And setbacks.
So learning to rise is all about resilience.
Right, that ability to bounce back from adversity.
To adapt to change and to learn from our mistakes.
And to embrace failure as a stepping stone.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is, because I think a lot of us have been taught to fear failure.
Yeah, to see it as a sign of weakness.
But Dr. Van Hook says that failure is just part of the journey.
It's inevitable.
Exactly. And she talks about this idea of failing forward.
What does that mean?
So it means learning from our mistakes and using them to grow.
Okay.
And she gives some great examples of people who failed forward.
Oh, like who?
Well, Christopher Columbus.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The Wright brothers.
Oh, okay.
Steve Jobs.
Wow, yeah, he had some setbacks.
He did. And Albert Einstein.
No way, Einstein too.
Yeah, even Einstein. So it's a good reminder that failure is normal.
It's part of the process.
Exactly. And she talks about the importance of managing that fear of failure.
Which can hold us back from trying new things.
Exactly. So how do we fail forward and develop resilience?
Yeah, what's the secret sauce?
Well, one key is to have no regrets.
Okay.
Life's too short to dwell on the past.
Right.
Another is to accept reality.
Don't play the victim.
Exactly. Take ownership of your choices.
Or from your experiences.
And she also talks about approaching each day as a learning opportunity.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and embracing those whoops moments with a sense of humor.
Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously.
Exactly. And she also talks about freeing ourselves from the innovation-limiting shackles of perfection.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's so true.
What does that mean?
It means that we can't let the fear of making mistakes stifle our creativity.
Okay.
We have to be willing to get messy,
To experiment.
to try things and fail.
Because perfectionism can hold us back.
It can. And that's where resilience comes in.
Okay.
Resilient leaders are willing to feel the fear and do it anyway.
To embrace the unknown.
Exactly. And she actually introduces this 3-step process for learning to rise.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So she calls it the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution.
Ooh, those sound powerful.
These are. So let's start with the reckoning.
Okay.
The reckoning is all about becoming aware of our emotions in challenging situations.
So instead of blaming others,
Right, we turn inward.
we get curious about what's happening inside of us.
Exactly, even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay, and then what?
Then we move to the rumble.
Another rumble.
Yeah, but this time it's a rumble with ourselves.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's about being brutally honest with ourselves.
Even when it's hard.
Yes, and she warns us about falling into the trap of conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah, she means the stories we tell ourselves to avoid the truth.
Oh, yeah, like when we blame other people for our own problems.
Exactly, or when we make excuses for our behavior.
It's so easy to get caught up in those stories.
It is, but daring leadership requires us to challenge them.
To be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
Even when it's painful.
Okay, so we've had the reckoning and the rumble. What about the revolution?
The revolution is the culmination of all of it.
Ooh, okay.
It's about closing authorship of our own stories and our lives.
So it's about taking all of these skills.
The vulnerability, the trust, the resilience.
Yeah, putting them into practice.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about letting go of that armor,
Yeah.
living into our values,
Braving trust.
and rising strong from our falls.
I love that. It's about becoming the hero of our own story.
It is. And she reminds us that we have a choice.
Okay.
We can let our past define us.
Or we can use it to grow.
Exactly. And that's what the revolution is all about.
Wow. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And you might be wondering how all of this relates to you, the listener.
Right. Because it can feel kind of theoretical. Yeah. So how can our listeners apply these principles to their own lives?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that daring leadership isn't just for CEOs or managers.
Right.
It's for all of us.
It's about being a courageous human being.
Exactly. No matter what role you play in life.
Whether you're a parent or a student or an artist
Or a CEO.
or a CEO.
It's about showing up authentically
Yeah.
in your relationship.
Your work.
Humanity.
It's about having the courage to be vulnerable,
Speak your truth.
to set boundaries,
To build trust.
and to learn and grow from your experiences.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And it's about creating a world where those qualities are celebrated.
I love that.
Yeah. So as we head into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a question.
Okay, hit me.
What if, instead of striving for perfection, we embraced the messiness of being human?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What if, instead of hiding our vulnerabilities, we shared them with courage and compassion?
Wow.
And what if, instead of fearing failure, we saw it as an opportunity for growth?
Those are powerful questions.
They are. And I think the answer lies in embracing the principles of daring leadership.
Yeah, I think so too. And we'll explore those answers further in part 3. But for now, let's take a quick break.
Okay, so we're back.
Back for more daring leadership.
Yes, and I think what's really exciting is that we're not just talking theory here.
Right.
Dr. Van Hook gives us a lot of practical stuff.
Yeah, like tools and strategies.
Yeah, things we can actually use.
In our real lives.
Exactly. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
How do we actually put these principles into practice?
So one of the most fundamental things is to practice vulnerability.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing.
Yeah, like quitting your job and moving to a foreign country.
Right. It can be small.
Small things.
Like telling a friend how you really feel.
Yeah.
Or admitting when you've messed up. Or asking for help when you need it.
It's like those little everyday acts of courage.
Exactly.
And those add up over time.
Yeah, so don't underestimate the power of small things.
Right. And remember those Rumble conversations?
Oh yeah, those were good.
So those are a great way to put daring leadership into practice.
Remind me, what's a Rumble again?
So it's a conversation where you commit to being vulnerable,
Okay.
being honest, and finding solutions.
Even when it's tough.
Especially when it's tough.
So it's not about winning an argument.
No, it's about working together.
To solve a problem.
Exactly. And she gives some really good tips for how to rumble effectively.
Oh, like what?
So one thing is to stay curious
Okay.
and generous.
Curious and generous. How does that work in a Rumble?
So it means approaching the conversation, wanting to understand the other person's point of view.
Even if you disagree.
Even if you totally disagree.
Okay.
And assuming good intentions.
Like believing that everyone wants to find a solution.
Exactly.
So it's about focusing on the we.
Yeah, not the me.
Okay.
Another tip is to stick with the messy middle.
The messy middle.
Yeah, because rumbles can get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's tempting to just try to fix it quickly. Right. Or to smooth things over.
Yeah, but it's important to allow yourselves to sit with that discomfort.
To really explore the issue.
And to work through it together.
To embrace the mess.
Exactly.
Okay. And what else?
Oh, and this is a big one. You have to own your part.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to blame other people.
Or to make excuses.
Right, but daring leadership requires us to take responsibility.
For our own actions.
Yeah, exactly.
And for how we contribute to the situation.
Yes, accountability is key.
Okay, so we've talked about individual actions.
Yeah.
But what about creating a culture of courage?
Oh, that's so important.
Like in our workplaces or our communities or even our families.
Yeah, it's not just about what we do as individuals.
Right, it's about the environment we create.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we foster a culture of courage?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, one thing is to celebrate courage.
Okay.
Like when you see someone taking a risk or speaking their truth or admitting a mistake,
Yeah.
acknowledge it, appreciate it, make it clear that those things are valued. So it's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Another thing is to create safe spaces.
Safe spaces for what?
For people to share their ideas,
Okay.
their concerns, even their failures.
Without being judged.
Exactly. It's about creating that psychological safety.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. And finally, we need to be willing to challenge the status quo.
Oh, yeah.
Courageous cultures aren't afraid to question things,
We try new things.
to experiment, and to fail.
Yeah, failure is part of the process.
It is. So embrace it.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of daring leadership, and we've talked about how to put it into practice.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to acknowledge that it can be challenging.
Oh, for sure. It's not always easy.
So what are some of the challenges that people might face?
Well, one of the biggest ones is fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection.
Yeah, fear can be so paralyzing.
It can.
And
And it can
fun.
hold us back from doing amazing things.
It's like that armor we were talking about.
Exactly. It might feel safe, but it also keeps us trapped.
Okay, and what else?
Well, sometimes we encounter people who are threatened by vulnerability and courage.
Oh yeah, like people who are more comfortable with the status quo
Right, people who like to be in control.
and who avoid tough conversations,
Exactly. And those people can be in positions of power.
which would make it really difficult.
It can. So what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, the most important thing is to remember that you can't control other people,
Right.
You can only control yourself.
So focus on what you can influence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means setting boundaries.
Okay.
Or having those tough conversations.
Even if it's scary.
Even if it's terrifying.
And sometimes it means walking away.
Yeah, if the situation is toxic.
It's about protecting your own well-being.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that you don't have to do this alone.
Right.
Find people who support you.
Friends, family mentors, therapists.
Yeah, build your own personal board of directors.
I love that.
Yeah, and remember, we are stronger together.
So true.
And that brings us back to the heart of daring leadership.
Which is connection with ourselves.
Yeah, and with others.
It's about building authentic relationships.
Where we can be vulnerable and courageous.
And fully ourselves.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
Daring leadership is for everyone.
Not just CEOs and managers.
It's about showing up with courage, vulnerability, and authenticity.
In all areas of our lives.
And creating a world where those qualities are celebrated.
I love that. Yeah. So well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into daring leadership.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as I have.
Me too.
And remember, the world needs your courage.